Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're watching Newcastle Fast FM. This is The Late Show live with your host, Abu Tayeb. And we have a new guest for tonight. As always, every night, we've got a special guest. We've got two boldies in the house today. Joni, welcome, co-host. How are you, bro?
Well, Alhamdulillah, good, bro. Good,
You
good.
ready for tonight's show?
Always, bro.
Waiting for
Alhamdulillah.
we've actually got two guests. We've got one which is Mr. Scotland here, Omar Bhatti. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
How you doing, bro?
Alhamdulillah. How was everybody today?
Alhamdulillah. You've been watching the Late Show these evenings?
Yeah, on and off, bro. On and off when I'm. I don't know if you're keeping up with my statuses, but I keep falling asleep and missing suhoor.
Alhamdulillah. So we've got Umar in the house. We've got Brother Jamil going to be joining us shortly as well, inshallah. So let's get this show on the road. Tonight we're going to be talking about the Muslamic invasion of Scotland, right? So there's a number of things we're going to talk about here. And we're going to break it down, inshallah. We've been talking a lot of stuff about Islam and Dawah. Tonight is going to be a little bit different show. So today we're going to start off with, let's introduce our guest, Omar. Omar, tell us a little bit about yourself, bro.
Oh, where do I start? My name is obviously Omar, from Scotland, hence today's show, the Muslamic takeover of Scotland. What about me, man? I'm 34. I've been in the Dawah scene for, God, subhanAllah, man, since just after I started practicing, I think, or just after I got married. And then I stopped when my son was born. So yeah, I had a little bit of an impact, I like to think, in the Dawah scene, especially in social media. And then, yeah, sort of gave that up when my son was born premature. And ever since then, I've been sort of taking a back seat and helping out whoever wants a hand and concentrating on raising a family, I suppose.
Alhamdulillah. How is your son, by the way? How is he now?
MashaAllah, tabarakallah, he's 5 now. He's well, once upon a time he was born very, very premature. He was
How many months, bro?
He was 27 weeks old when he was born. So he was 13 weeks premature, and he only weighed 1 pound 4 ounces. So that's 640 grams. So
Wow.
like just over half a bag of sugar.
Premature as well.
Oh, subhanallah, yours as well. What did he? What was his weight?
Man, I forgot the word, man. I shouldn't forget. But he was very tiny that I could put him in my palm. That was that tiny.
Subhanallah, I didn't know that. That's
yeah, bro, that was a very hard time for me to say that. Obviously, that time, bro, subhanallah. If you don't have the iman, the subhanallah, bro, that time you will go all over the place. Literally.
Do you know what? You know what? At that moment, the first night, the doctor, who was one of my long-term family friends, he said, we'll take it every 15 minutes. They didn't expect him to survive because he was so small. He had no nipples. He had no eyebrows. He had just, like, it looked like a small fetus. And at that moment, I knew the true meaning of the word abd, from Abdullah, just the slave of Allah. I just felt totally helpless. And at that moment, I was standing by his incubator and I said, Ya Allah, I'm totally at your mercy. I can't do anything. You are the master of the worlds, and you're the only one that can save my son. And I remember making that dua, and that's the only time in my life I can say that I felt like that only Allah could control and do nothing, and I could do nothing, and only Allah could do something at that moment in time.
Bro, I can totally feel you, bro, because I've been through the same thing that you've been through, bro. Subhanallah. Those moments that you can never explain the feelings into words, bro. It's impossible. There's no language.
And then Surah Rahman comes to mind, where what of my favors do you deny? And honestly, at that moment, I was like, I am not worthy. I've been so wrong. I've done this sin. I've done that sin. I've just been ignorant of all the blessings that you've given me. And at this moment, I'd give it all up just for my son to survive. That's how I felt at the time, bro. And you probably felt like that at the same time, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely, bro. I remember, bro.
SubhanAllah.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah,
it is. It's a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It shows you how helpless and how weak we actually are. We have no control, or very little control, of many things. And this is actually a sign of Allah's existence. Our dependency upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this so many things that we can take from that. And you know what? It's one of the things which is, it's a wake-up call, right? So whenever we go through certain calamities in life, trials and tribulations like that, especially when you have no control, and as the men of the house, right? Let's be honest about this, yeah. As the men of the house, as the imams of the house, as the leaders of the house, so to speak, our job, or we feel like we're in control and we want to be in control of everything, right? We want to protect our families, but sometimes you have no control over that whatsoever.
Yeah,
Literally, bro.
See what I mean? Anyway, guess who showed up, yeah?
Oh, bro, I have to
JC,
go
bro.
now.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
It looks like
Hey,
he's
guys.
frozen. Is he frozen?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Now that was just me doing that. I think I'll just chill here and see if anybody works out that I'm actually moving. I'm alive,
How you doing,
alhamdulillah. How
Jamil?
is everyone?
Alhamdulillah. How are you?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm alright. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it looks
Yeah,
like
alhamdulillah, I'm alright.
it looks like you're sitting in a cave in Afghanistan or something, though, with that connection, bro.
No. I'm in a cave in Aberdeen, mate. Aberdeen.
My man got
North of the
kicked out.
border.
All right, listen. Let's
What's that?
talk a little about Scotland, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Omar, let's check this out, yeah. I've been going to Scotland, Glasgow in particular, since childhood, right? And I'll tell
Yeah.
you why. Because most of my dad's bin is from there, right? They all live in a place called Pollock Shields, right? in
Pollock
Glasgow.
Shields, bro.
Yeah, Pollock Shields, yeah. And I've literally been going there since childhood to go and visit my cousins and different relatives that are there. And it's like never ending. You go to one place and you have to go to like 50 places. on
Yeah,
your
standard,
trip,
bro.
right? And it's
Standard.
not just you have to go to one place, you get fed in every single place that you go to. So
Bro, they take offense. This is it. Like, I know that there's an Asian typical culture thing where they say that you take offense, but Scottish Pakistanis, if you don't eat in their house, they'll cuss you. They'll bundle
they
on
will
you.
literally cuss you, yeah, and it's that Punjabi type of cussing as well, which is not no soft cussing, right? And it's all fried food. And this is why I had to limit my trips there, because otherwise I'd turn out like Jamil, yeah, if I kept on going there regularly. You know what I'm saying, Jamil?
Keep up the good work, man. Keep up the good work. That's what I say about that.
Yeah,
That's how it has to be done. Listen, if you're going to go to a place here and you're not going to eat, obviously, if it's Ramadan, that's a different story. But if you're going to go to a place and you're not going to eat, then subhanAllah, there's something wrong with you, bruv. You got to,
there is.
what's the word I'm looking for? You got to entertain the locals. That's what I'm saying.
But check this out. Check this out, though, yeah. So you can't.
Go on.
If you don't eat, right, you're going to offend them, and and it's not just like a normal offense. They're going to cuss you out hard, right? And they're going to pretty much force feed you, right? But imagine you turn up somewhere, right? Like somewhere like Salahuddin's house or some other vegan's house, right? Like Johnny, right? And he feeds you like grass, offers you grass, and that's about it. What are you gonna do then? Johnny, imagine turn up Johnny's house and he gives you a plate of salad, yeah? You're gonna be offended about what they offered you, yeah?
You're gonna hear some Stone Age Punjabi cuss words coming out of my mouth.
There's going to be new cuss words in Punjabi that are going to come out of our mouths, yeah? So it's not even going to be the regular stuff. That's what's going to happen. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, so as I was saying, I've been coming up to Glasgow. I haven't been there for some time, to be fair, yeah, in the last so many years.
There's a simple solution, there's a simple solution here. You guys just need to...
Bro, you need to change your Wi-Fi, my friend.
Bro, you need to get some proper internet, bro, Jamil.
You know,
London, bro. So
everybody who knows Jamil will probably know that Jamil's got his own Wi-Fi system set up, and this is why it's running like this.
Anyway, the point I was making, Omar, yeah, so I haven't been there for a while. I'm not sure what's happening on the ground for the last, I don't know how many years, yeah.
Yeah.
But I do expect there's been a lot of changes. The last time I was there was maybe about 10 years ago or something like that. And I went to do a program in Masjid al-Faruq.
Yeah.
And what I noticed was, there was a lot of Eastern Europeans in that area.
Yeah.
Who've moved in. So tell us a little bit about Scotland, bro, and Glasgow.
So
and what's been going on?
That area, Govan Hill, had the highest murder rate in Europe back then, about 10 years ago. I'm pretty sure it was around about then. So when they said Glasgow's got the highest murder rate, they meant that specific area, what you're talking about, where Masjid al-Faruq is. And what happened was, to my understanding, is when the immigrants from Eastern European came across, what happened is they brought their beef from back home, and they would just kill each other. Like they would go in and stab each other and whatnot. Even if you go down where Mustafa is, just there's a famous street called Allison Street. Halfway down it, incidentally enough, that's where my granddad had one of his shops in 1974. One of the first Asians to have a shop down that way. But what happened was, if you go down it now, it's that style of lots of little kids. You can just tell they're not born in Scotland; they're immigrants, and they just hang about in the little crowds on each street corner. And you can see where the beef is going to start, because it's just like this street corner is not getting along with that street corner.
Right.
That's from my observations anyway.
I noticed that because when I was there, I was just walking around in the night time just to see what's going on. And it's exactly how you described it. Like groups of young men hanging around on street corners, yeah? And looking shady, basically, yeah?
Yeah.
And there's me walking through the middle of them all, in the middle of the night, trying to check out what's happening in the area, yeah? But, the point is, it's interesting you say that, because most people associate Glasgow with knife crime anyway, yeah, from the locals. Okay, it's supposed to be the highest knife crime capital in the UK and all that stuff. Is that still true?
No, not anymore. It's on the decline. Basically, like if you take London for example, where knife crime is prevalent, where you can see the actions what Scotland took and what London are not taking, if that makes sense. So basically, they started with the kids. Knife crime is not right, and so they try to do a lot of. From my understanding, is that from school they introduced like a lot of youth development courses and classes, and like they worked really hard on them. I wouldn't know the ins and outs, but this is from my understanding what they did, and it paid off, bro. Like they worked on the youth, so obviously they lost a generation of who's going to stab everybody and things along those lines. And this was prevalent way back. Even the Scottish, the Caucasian Scottish people, I mean, they used to slash each other, things like that. However, like this generation, up and it still goes on, but not to the extent that it used to happen. Just because they're more educated in terms of the damage it can do to the families, and this person suffers and that person suffers. And you got to remember, this generation now is probably from a lot of people that have seen stuff that happened and they didn't want to be part of that anymore. So it's quite interesting in the dynamics that they took, and maybe I would use it as a template to put into other areas throughout the UK that have got high knife crime, because you can't go from one of having the highest knife crime rate down to what I would say is not the highest anymore. I don't know how high it is in terms of, I've not checked out in a few years, because it doesn't even make the news anymore. That's how much of an issue. Yeah, it doesn't. It very rarely makes the news. People still die and they get stabbed and things like that, and they get shot, and all these things happen, but not to the level it was happening, and it doesn't make the news as much.
There was another area I remember going as in my teens, yeah. A place called is it called Easter House? Was it Easter House?
Easter House, yeah. Gangsterville, yeah.
That was a pretty rough area. I remember my cousins taking me there, and I was like, "Where have you brought me, man? What is going on here?"
That's like Compton. It's the Compton.
Yeah, literally.
I call it the Compton. It's crazy.
It was an out, and plus, basically, one of my cousins had a shop right bang in the middle of it all. Yeah, so it was like in the middle of the hood, literally the hood. Yeah, it was mad.
So my dad, he used to have a lot of friends from that area. My dad was one of the first. He was one of the first bouncers, doorman in Scotland who was an Asian back in the early 80s, late 80s. So you can imagine the abuse he used to get. Yeah, my dad's a tough guy, mashallah. However,
what happened to you then?
What happened to me? He beat it out of me, bro.
Beat it in you, yeah,
bro. So, I can take a beating. Tell you that much. But yeah, but back then, even my dad, he would warn me, stay away from Easter House.
Right.
Stay away from it. I've been there a few times, but it's just you go in and
what a rough place.
You can just feel the oppression. That's what I used to feel when I went in, especially when
racism as well.
Yeah, you know what it is. See, if you're from that area, they don't mind too much. However, if you're from out with that area, you don't know. You get the looks, man. You know something's about to go down. Yeah,
man. And then there's like and the opposite, and I've got family on the other side, which is like Bishop Briggs, which apparently like the nice area. Apparently, yeah, I've got.
It's all right.
If
Bishop
there's such
Briggs
a
is
thing,
nice.
yeah.
I mean, subhanAllah, wherever they're Pakistanis, there's not a nice area. The white people move out straight away. But yeah, the Bishop Briggs is.
They've got a term for that, yeah. They've got a term for that.
coming.
It's called white flight, yeah.
It's what, white flight?
White flight, yeah.
Yeah, bro, it makes sense, bro. It's like you could tell it's a nice neighborhood. Pakistanis move in, and what I don't get, bro, is why do we always make it look nasty outside? Like, why are our bins everywhere? Like, I don't get it. I just don't get it, bro.
That's a million question, bro. That's what it is,
bro. It's not everywhere, I don't think.
But subhanAllah, these areas which you mentioned in Glasgow was it's always been a rough area. But alhamdulillah, do you know the people in Glasgow? Do you know, like, giving them da'wah and the very close? Do you know the morals and the way they look after the parents and the way they've got family and things like that? They're very, very close to Islam. They've got good morals.
The ethic code and stuff, you mean?
Yeah, the ethic codes and treating your neighbours right, respecting the elders. Obviously, when the youngsters these days,
that there, yeah, you still have that type of mentality over there.
Do you know my age? Well, when my age group, we do. It is dying out. You can tell with the youth that are coming through that it's not as what it used to be when I was growing up. Like even my next door neighbour. I remember I grew up in a very rough area, but our next door neighbour was like an old granny type woman. Everybody respected her, like she said something that all the kids just used to like not bother her and things like that. She used to look after the kids, give us lots of sweets and cakes and whatnot. And we had an ethic code of growing up. Like we would sort of respect our elders, even though we were really, really from a bad area. We still respected our elders, and that was before Islam. Like even way like I was a kid back then. I don't notice that so much now. However, it's still the element of it is still there. So, because my wife is obviously she's from England, High Wycombe areas, and even when I go down there, I can just see the not the practicing youth down there, mashallah, tabarakallah. They've got a good Muslim community. However, with that, you can just tell that the way they walk about, the disregard for the older people and things like that. However, up in Scotland, it's still, I feel it's still there, and people talk to you, bro. Do you know, like? For example, one of the things my wife found when she moved to Scotland was that she's used to the underground, going in the underground, nobody talking to anybody. And, if somebody looks at somebody, it's like they've got an ulterior motive or they're trying to rob somebody. Here, like, you can stand at a bus stop and make best friends with a person who's waiting at the bus stop. They've told you the full life story while the bus is coming. It's amazing, subhanAllah. They're really, really nice people up here.
Yeah. It's the same. It's the same as Newcastle. Actually, it's a very similar culture like that.
Yeah.
I'm actually hoping that they make Newcastle a part of Scotland at some point. Move the border down a little bit. But anyway, go on.
It was at one point, wasn't it, when William Wallace sacked? He sacked down to York. So Scotland used to go all the way down to York at one point.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, look, what a disgrace, for you. You're Scottish and you married an English girl. What's the matter with you, man? What's happening?
Do you know, I realised the other day, I was looking at my son and I goes, Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un, and I was just like, you're half English. I was like, bro.
For those who are watching, are not going to understand the whole Scottish-English beef thing, I know it because whenever I used to go up there, I used to hear it all the time, cussing the English out. Not just the Muslims, everyone used to just cuss the English out regularly, Break it down to us. Why is there so much beef today between the Scottish and the English? And why is the Scots always, constantly, absolutely annihilating the English every time you speak to them? Break it down for us, man.
Bro, you talk from you've got to remember, man, this is centuries and centuries and centuries old when Scotland had its own independence, had its own monarchy system, and the terrible crimes that like the English committed in Scotland. This whole I mean, it probably even goes on till today that the tactics that were used back then are still being used today in the countries that we feel strongly about at the moment. But subhanAllah, it's from all the way back then to now. I mean, you're taught it I was taught it in school in history as well, like the battle of quite a lot of the famous battles and the things that were done in those battles, and it's quite. I mean, like when you tell kids that, I don't know what they're teaching them in school now in terms of history, but what I was taught was how the English were treating the Scottish people, and Braveheart. When I was in school, Braveheart had just sort of the film Braveheart about William Wallace and Mel Gibson had sort of taken out, and our history teacher told us what was true from that film and what wasn't true. Quite a lot wasn't true, but quite a lot of it was true. And how he explained it to us, you're quite impressionable at that age, 13, 14 years old, and you're told that this group of people done this to your group of people, and naturally straight away you've got a hatred towards that group of people. And even if it is as a joke,
that's like history, right? So I get that, from back in the days, whatever. But what about in the modern context? Is it the only thing I can assume is
it's just so self-entitled, man. You watch the England football game, right? You hear the commentators. What are they like, bro? Oh, we're going to win the World Cup. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to... Bro, it's so self-entitlement, right? And you ask any of the home nations, anybody from Scotland, I think there was a rugby advert like this where Wales, Ireland, Northern Ireland and Scotland and things like that, they talked about the English. Everybody hated them. They want to... They just want to... Anybody that's English, you want to like... Even if it was like India playing England, you're like, I want India to win. Or I want Bangladesh to win, even though you're like, I don't even know people from here anymore.
Johnny, does Bangladesh even have a football team? What's going on, man?
Bro, we do have, man. We're good at cricket. We don't care about the football, bro.
So your football team is a cricket team, yeah? Okay, very good. The point is, I think the only thing that I can think of, apart from the self-entitlement thing, I get that it's annoying and all the rest of it, but like up here in the northeast, it's always been Labour, and it's probably always going to be Labour for the simple fact that Westminster just doesn't give a crap about us, up north.
Yep.
We're always the ones hardest hit when it comes to policies and finances and economy and all the rest of it. So I'm assuming that's the same with the Scottish. Scotland usually gets put at the bottom of the pile type thing, when it comes to any of the major politics and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, you see it yourself at the moment, like what Boris Johnson said yesterday and what Nicola Sturgeon came out and said. So it's going on. Do you know, like especially when we had the Scottish independence rally, we were everybody's like, Scotland, we're going to get independent and things along those lines.
Yeah, you guys messed up, man. You had the chance.
Yeah, we had the chance, but look how
you screwed it up so bad.
Look how the media turned against us, though. They were like, you're not going to survive, and Scotland's running out of oil and whatnot. Then 12 weeks later, after the vote of independence, they found more oil reserves magically came out of nowhere. And you know things like
that's
this.
what the media does, isn't it? That's what the media. That's their job.
Basically, Scotland is Jeremy Corbyn, so that's exactly what happened.
Bruv, do you know, if you think about it, right? Scotland contributed to Conservatives being in power because we could have just voted Labour, because SNP. I don't know. I'm not that massively into politics anymore. However, the SNP they thrive on that nationalism. They're just like, we're Scottish and we want to be independent, and they sell you this great big dream, but it's never going to happen. But it's a dream at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean that's from a political point of view. Now let's talk about Islam, and Dawah in general. One thing I've noticed over the years, and it happened to us in Newcastle for many years, and then we had to take action into our own hands, basically. But a lot of the Dawah was the classes, the Islamic classes, the Dawah, all that used to happen down south, London, Birmingham. It was notorious, right? Yep. Scotland seems to have always been neglected when it comes to anything to do with Islam, anything to do with the Dawah. The Northeast used to be as well, until we took matters in our own hand back in 2002. And then we said, you know what, scrap that. We don't need nobody. We're just going to do it all ourselves, Yep. But even to this day, it seems like Scotland seems to still be neglected by everybody. And there doesn't seem to be that much going on.
Bro, So when I started getting involved into Dawah, and I developed the name Abu Dawah, and I was traveling up and down England.
By the way, you know that?
Huh?
That was a joke.
Oh, bro, it was a gimmick. Bro, it was a gimmick. It was marketing, bro.
Dawah in their name. Honestly, it's
Yeah.
one of my pet peeves. Yeah, it's
Bro,
a gripe that I've got, right?
bro, we know.
I mean, imagine Jamil's name being Jamil Dawah Specialist or something like that. Yeah,
Jimmy Dawah.
Jamie Dawah. Yeah, imagine that. Yeah, that'd be ridiculous.
Do you know there was a hype back then, right? The online hype, and I got sucked into it, and I did it, and I left it after a couple of years because I realized that, you know, after speaking to a couple of scholars and a few imams, and you know, alhamdulillah, I never had that pride in me where the name was bigger than, you know, Jannah or Jahannam for me, if that makes sense. It wasn't an ego thing. I left it pretty quickly, and I gave away my Facebook page, and I gave away my YouTube channels, and I took down all my videos. Majority of the videos are all down, and it was simply because the fact was I wasn't qualified, bro. You know what I'm saying? Giving fatwa, and you know, you don't even mean to be doing it, and you end up doing it, and you make videos on things you should be making videos on, and you know.
You get caught up in hype, innit? That's what happens.
You caught up in the hype, and what happens is, bro, when you're online like that, what happens is, and we've seen it with a number of people, and when I mention what I'm about to mention, you probably notice it a lot more. You know who I'm talking about, but you see the growth of that person online, whereas, you know, like if you're studying under a scholar, your growth is secluded to the group that you're studying with. So the more you learn, your opinions change, and eventually when you mature, you settle in certain opinions when you get older. However, when you see somebody's whole life spread across the internet within five years, and you're like, well, I'm never going to take you seriously ever again, even if when you become settled, if that makes sense. So I protect myself from that. However, going back to Scotland, bro, like alhamdulillah, when I was with Aira, what happened was I set up with permission of Allah, set up a dawah stall in each major city of Scotland. So one in Edinburgh, one in Glasgow, one in Dundee, one in Aberdeen. I've done a lot of talks, and I got a lot of people, and you know, it was me driving here, driving there, and you know, giving the talks. When Hamza would come up to Scotland, I'd drive him about sometimes. When other people would come to Scotland, I'd go and visit them. I had the 3D weekends with Aira, and you know, like I had all these things going on, bro. But you know what it is, bro? I was the only driving force, if that makes sense. So it was happening, and when I stopped, it stopped. It stopped. And to this day, I mean, I think there's a few dawah stalls going on, and they sometimes contact me. I think a couple of brothers about a year ago in Glasgow tried to contact me and get me back on board, but I got disillusioned, if that makes sense. I got burnout as well, where I felt like I was the only person doing something. I was trying to replicate what you brothers, mashallah, were doing in Newcastle, but I never had. We started something in Edinburgh. It was called Vision Islam that we started in Edinburgh, but that took a different turn, and I joined Aira, and you know, the politics that come along with another organization when you went to join another organization played into it, and it was all the downfall. It wasn't the downfall. It wasn't what I wanted to be, and the people that we had weren't mature enough around me to hold it, and there wasn't enough visionaries. And I can say that I wasn't a visionary. I was very short-sighted, where all I could see was a dawah stall, and that's the only opportunity of dawah because it's successful at the time. And it worked. SubhanAllah, a dawah table in Scotland, bro, you can speak to about 50 or 60 people, and not one person will say anything bad to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
You'd get the odd person who would say something or whatever, very rarely. But majority of the time, bro, the Scottish people are very tolerable. We're very like open-minded. We're open to new ideas.
Speaking, that's true. Compared to like places like London, which is an absolute mess. What an absolute mess that place is, If you try to go do a dawah store in London, it's you literally can't give stuff away for free, man, to get them to stop. It's not the easiest thing to do. But up north, I think it's true, the statement: the further up north you go, the more friendlier people generally are. They don't mind a bit of banter. Even if they don't want to listen to what you're saying, they'll still have a bit of banter with you. They'll still have a bit of a chat, you know, and everything's generally okay. Obviously, you'll get some people who every now and then, maybe some EDL support or something, but generally speaking,
very rarely, bro. I mean, there's like a group of like 5 people that were part of something called the SDL. It's funny because
because the question on here, Muslim BB, one of our regular viewers, he's put on that: is there a lot of Islamophobia in Scotland like there is in England? Do you have the same?
You know what? Not at all. there might be a little bit more now, you know, with the media and having enough, you know, all the attacks that happen. Obviously, generally people get scared and things along those lines. However, I always cast my mind back to, and it's still to this day, I can walk down a lot of streets in Scotland and not get, I'll get the looks, but I won't get the abuse that you would get in England, if that makes sense. If I go to a stronghold EDL populated area, I'm bound to get somebody say something to me. I've had it numerous times when I've been on the outskirts of London, like small villages, people looking at me, and I can just feel the uneasy tension and things along those lines. However, in Scotland, don't get me wrong, you get racists of every walk of life and whatnot, but very rarely, I'm just trying to think of the last time somebody said something to me that was Islamophobic. I think it was when my wife was wearing a heads, and she wears a hijab, alhamdulillah. And I think somebody said something back then, but that was years and years and years ago. But I can feel the tension getting a little bit more every time something happens. People's tolerance is getting less. However, the Scottish tolerance is really, really high. But majority, I would say 90% of the people in Scotland, they don't care, if that makes sense. They really don't care.
Yeah.
They know a lot of Muslims. The local shopkeepers are Muslim. They've been helped out by Muslims. The people that have their neighbours are Muslims, and always you speak to any Scottish person who's got Muslim neighbours or Pakistani or any ethnic minority neighbours, one thing they'll say is they always feed us the food. They're going to hand the food out. My next door neighbour made this food for me, and they'll start surprising you, and they'll start coming out with like chana masala or like aloo roti and things. You're like, where did you learn these words? And they're like, oh, my neighbour gave me these foods. And alhamdulillah, they've got that subtle dawah, that is through morals and just having good behaviors and things like that. That goes a long way, bro, a very, very long way. So when they finally hear the message of Islam, they're like, oh, they like that because they're Muslims. That makes sense, and then their hearts open up to it a little bit. But yeah, majority of the people that I've come across in Scotland, some of my best friends that I grew up with, they're easygoing. They'll talk to you about religion. They're open-minded, and even there's one boy that I went to school with, and he turned out to be an alcoholic. He's a recovering alcoholic, alhamdulillah. And he was not majorly into Tommy Robinson. However, he was quoting him quite a bit. Then I educated him a little bit. I just told him, like, this is his beliefs and this is our beliefs and this is what he says. And he's like, really? I was like, have you ever spoke to a Muslim about these things? And he was like, no. So I spoke to him, and I gave him da'wah in terms of like what a Muslim is and things. And he was like, that's amazing. So, and his brother was a big Tommy Robinson supporter, and he fell out with his brother just because of things that I said to him.
Right.
So subhanAllah, it was.
I think this is why that holistic dawah is so important. Dawah is when we studied what dawah actually is. When you study the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, yes, there is that direct sort of missionary style of dawah. There's no doubt that's part of what the dawah is.
Yep.
But it's not the be all end all. That's the point. And I think people made it into the be all end all, where that is the only thing that a dawah store. That's what dawah is. No. This is why in IDC with Islamic Diversity Center, we looked at it from a slightly different perspective and said, look, okay, dawah comes in a number of different forms and shades. Yes, the direct dawah is required there, but also the indirect dawah is just as important. And then you have, the dawah through morals, manners, and so on and so forth. But so I think it's having that balance between all of them. That's what we came to the conclusion of.
It definitely is. And I went down the route of having dawah stalls and getting educated in debates and learning from Hamza and, learning from Sabur and going into dawah tables. And I went from starting out as a sincere person who gives dawah to my argument is better than your argument. And
Bro, one of the things that annoys me the most about modern day debates, and dawah debates, it's literally become one-upmanship, right? Who can win the argument and who can have the last say? Let me annihilate him and let me look how we can humiliate him, guys. That's not dawah. That's push it. If you want my honest opinion, many times that becomes anti-dawah. That pushes people away from Islam. And that really, really does annoy me.
SubhanAllah, if you look at the seerah of Muhammad, you can't think of one occasion when Muhammad where he went out and he ridiculed somebody and he tried to do one-upmanship. But even the famous Mubahala scene, if you go through that, it wasn't about getting one-upmanship. It was never about saying, you know what, you're an absolute idiot, and I'm a better person than you. It was never sort of that arrogant dawah, if you want to call it, and you get yourself into that. Don't get me wrong, I love a passionate debate, subhanAllah. You know, like Scottish people, do you know when they get into it, they'll get into it backwards and forwards and things like that. However, bro, like my job is not to mentally exhaust myself to outdo your argument. My job is to give you a message of salvation, if you want. And if you accept it, accept it. If you don't, like, come on, let's hear what you've got to offer. Let's speak about it in rational terms. And that's what the deen is that you come to common terms and you talk about it.
Man, have a proper legit conversation, and it comes across being a lot more genuine as well. Anyways, a comment on here saying, what's JC saying? JC's just sitting there. I've never seen him so quiet in my life for this length of time. There's no way there's something wrong with him, I'm telling you, because this is
his Wi-Fi is busted, bro. That's why.
You know, JC, you're gonna tell them when you came to Scotland and you travelled all over Scotland and you're like, I'm here and I wanted to go there, but every time I got to one place, you went to the other side of Scotland.
Tactical avoidance. It was a good idea. I don't know if I'm still having these technical issues at the moment as well. So if you guys can't hear me, let me know as well. I've just
we can hear you. It's good.
Is it all right now? Okay.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, I don't know if it was working, to be honest, and I just thought I'm in the middle of London, so you lot are out in the sticks, and obviously our connection's a bit overloaded, because I've noticed around London everybody's been on the lockdown, but they don't seem to be locked in their houses. They seem to be locked anywhere in the streets, and the communication's going on. I'll say that much as well. But yeah, no, I mean, Omar, you're right, mashallah. Obviously, I came all the way to Scotland, drove up there. I was actually in Falkirk at one point, and which is 20 minutes around the corner from his house. Because I wanted to see some engineering going on the Falkirk wheel, and he turned around and said, and you turned around and said you're in a different area. I was like, okay, that's fine. So then I went over to Edinburgh or wherever it was, and then he was in Glasgow. So it was just like, yeah, we're doing well here. It's just tactical avoidance, absolutely fine. But this is how the da'wah works up there as well, isn't it? You just think, this guy's an Englishman, I'm going to avoid him at all costs. But to be honest with you, I just want to lay in on something that we were discussing earlier about the English. I'll tell you one thing that Northern Ireland, Wales, and Scotland have in common.
They hate the English.
They all hate the English. Genuinely, they all hate the. You go there anywhere. Apart from Wales, if you go to North Wales, I hate the South. The guys from South Wales. I dislike the guys from South Wales, and South Wales hate the guys from the North Wales. But the rest of them, yeah, it's pretty universal. So at least it's there's some kind of uniformity going on.
It's interesting that that's what it is about the home nations. They've got this certain feeling about a particular nation. It's actually strange.
It's nationalism, isn't it? It's nationalism,
it's nationalism
on another level. But this is the problem: is that if you think about it, right? If we bring nationalism into it, and then you ask the question of why is the da'wah not continuing, it's quite simple. It's nationalism. It's as simple as that. Because as people see it, Islam is a brown man's religion. Spot the white man here. We haven't got any. But if you look at the guys who started off the da'wah, Abdullah Quilliam, yeah, he's obviously a native to the UK as well. So that's actually quite an interesting thing that we don't see. But people
you got to remember, these Scottish, the Asians in Scotland, they actually believe they're Scottish. I remember my cousin. I mean, he's like Asian. You can't get more Punjabi looking than this guy. Genuinely believing that he's Scottish, and he told me this story. He goes, I was so annoyed. Somebody asked me where I was from. He's got this thick Scottish accent, So he said, you know what? I put my kilt on, and I walked through the city centre, and I was asking any random Joe, do I look Scottish to you? And he was just asking random blokes about whether he looked Scottish or not. What a guy, man! What a guy! You know what I mean? These guys get up to, bro.
That's nationalism all around, man. That's nationalism right there. Let me put my skill on, laddie. I'll sort you out now. I'll give you a Glaswegian kiss here.
Do you know? Just out of you mentioned Quilliam there. One of the first Muslims in Scotland, Britain, if you want, Lady Evelyn. She took the name Zainab, and she was She was obviously born in Scotland in I think 1860s or something like that. And she was the first British Muslim from the UK to do Hajj, and something like 1930 something 32 or something like that. And I feel these things are not nearly enough talked about. She's buried in Scotland, north of Scotland, way at the top of Scotland, in her estate. But subhanAllah, man, you know, like if you ask the average Muslim from Scotland who this person is, or what her Muslim name was, or where is she buried, and you know, is she the first person? Nobody would know, you know, because they don't talk about it. It's not. There is a history of Islam in Scotland, in the UK before we came along 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, no, a lot of the time we actually totally miss this as well. Let's be frank about it. The one thing that we focus on is the here and now. But everybody's into what you were discussing earlier on. We're into debating, we're into fighting, we're into a one-upmanship. We're not into discussing, oh, hold on a second, historically, this is what happened. I mean, I was watching this Ilm feed thing going on, and actually showed women who were working in factories. They're predominantly English white, so therefore not the Asian or Muslim background kind of people as well. And they're wearing what we would class as full hijab, like covered properly. But this was the cover. This was the uniform. This was the dress of the time, and it is actually, to be honest with you, is hijab part of British history? Yes, it is. So in this regard, you say that to any nationalist, they'll turn around and go, "What are you on about? I'm going to punch you." You just turn around, and then what happens? You end up in a fight. This is da'wah today. Is that someone offers you out, and you're going to turn around to them and go, "Yeah, mate, I'll take you on. Come on, let's step outside," and you're in a pub. But anyway, that's a different story.
Yeah, you're just going there to do a pee, bro.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'll go in for a pint of milk.
Husna done. But bro, bro, it's very much true that I've noticed that in England. But I used to love street dawah. Anybody that knows me from back then, I used to love street dawah. It wouldn't be. I mean, went to Hyde Park and I stood up and.
Wait, is street dawah you when you're in the street because you were Abu Dawah, so therefore it's
obviously. Abu Street Dawah. But I used to love it. But do you know, in the last couple of months before I stopped, bro, I used to feel a nervousness in the streets of England. But I never felt it in Scotland, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, I felt like, you know, if I speak to this person, I might get stabbed. But in Scotland, I'd be like, you know, if I speak to this person, the worst they're going to give me is a headbutt. But they'll hug me after it. You know what I mean? They would just be like, "Oh, sorry, mate, didn't mean that." It's a Scottish Tourette's. But it's true. The Scottish people are as hard as that they are, and they like to fight and they like to drink and things like that. Scottish people are they're very soft people. Do you know, like if they bend over backwards to help you, they really, really will. If you move into a street or something like that, they'll come out and they'll be like, "Do you need a hand?" or "How are you?" and how's everybody settling in and things along those lines. It's amazing. It's amazing culture up here, and I don't foresee that dying out as much as it has in England. But I for sure have, back to your earlier point, it has with the younger generation. It has is fizzled out a little bit.
I think one of the things that I noticed about Scotland, I think what makes it quite different to England in terms of the dawah and Islam and the Muslims there in particular, I noticed, and do correct me if I'm wrong, because I've just been observing certain things and doing a little bit of research on this. It seems like the Muslims are generally a little bit more well integrated and accepted in terms of integration compared to England. For example, there's a disproportionate amount of Muslim politicians, for example, compared to UK, compared to England, right? So I've noticed there's a lot more Muslims who are a bit more integrated into society, even on a political level, compared to over here in England.
I like the way that you just turned around and said UK there, just put Scotland straight out of the United Kingdom.
Because they missed their chance, man. They should have gone independent when they had the chance. Yeah,
I agree, to be honest with you. Your system's not there.
So bad. William Wallace would have been so upset. He said he called for freedom. They almost had it. They were that far away, and they cocked it up so bad. Yeah,
absolutely.
It was very close, bro. 45%. That is 45% of the population, man. That's it's just about half, man, if you think about it.
You had your own version of Brexit and you screwed it up. Just let's be honest,
No, do you know what was funny? Do you know what was funny back then was that they said that we'll never leave Europe. That was one of the things that Scotland were saying, that Britain's going to leave Europe and we don't want to leave Europe. They said we'll never ever leave Europe. Then a couple of years later, they're like, you know what? Do you know that Europe? We're leaving it. And do you know how you didn't want to go? You're going to leave it as well. It's what you call a Pakistani marriage. It's a Pakistani marriage.
This is what you wanted. This is what you are going to get. But don't ask me. I tell you, this is it. Why don't you? I don't even know why I done it in that accent. But anyway,
That's Arab
Yeah, that
accent,
was
bro.
not even-
yeah, that was
Good,
good Portuguese accent, wasn't it? Yeah, thanks.
Is it? But no, you're right. The politician. I mean, the Glasgow had MP server. I forgot his first name. He was not a son of a bus driver. He was an MP in Scotland. He was I can't remember his first name, but yeah, he was MP in Glasgow for years and years and years and years. Muslim, Asian, nobody cared. It was very much. The Scottish people are more accepting, and when people are more accepting, it's easier to integrate. And it's actually a shame because we should be more accepting as a culture, as Muslims. We should be more accepting of other people, and then it shows you that when you're tolerant towards other people's beliefs, they're more likely to accept you. And that's what happens in Scotland, is that they're very tolerant, and then because they're tolerant to you, you're like, it's a lot easier for me to follow your way.
I think a lot of the other thing is that people are afraid of change. People are afraid of difference. So until they actually know what you're about, they're sort of anti you because they don't know how to treat you or what you believe. But another thing is, I think within our communities as well, I don't think we're helping the situation, because if you think the way that a lot of us are, we have British sense of humour. The way that we behave is typically British. The way that we dress is typically British. But we are Muslim, alhamdulillah. And a lot of people don't understand the difference between the two. And they think, well, if you're Muslim, then you must be different. And say, no, actually, if you look at, we're talking about in our current situation, we keep talking about the NHS. How many Muslim doctors, nurses, and medical staff are there within the NHS? There's hundreds, literally, hundreds, thousands, aren't there, across the country? So, and the way that it's all portrayed is, well, we are one NHS right now. So, okay, so now differentiate all the brown people, the black people, the white people, and then the Eastern Europeans, just as major separators. And you'd find that, well, everyone would stand up and say, well, what's the point? What difference is that going to make? Because a doctor's a doctor, a consultant's a consultant, a surgeon's a surgeon, a nurse is a nurse, a cleaner's a cleaner, and everybody has their role. Without every single part of that whole spectrum, you haven't got the NHS. So
the interesting thing is, Newcastle University did some research. I remember reading it. There was a proper academic piece on it, and they were looking at Islamophobia in the UK. And the conclusion that they came to was, we need to look at the Scottish model of dealing with Islamophobia, because Scotland seems to have, I don't know, you guys can, Omar can explain more detail, seems to have dealt with the Islamophobia issue a lot better than England has. And a lot of it's down to the integration aspect. I don't know.
Do you know, like, for example,
sorry, I missed that. Down to what aspect?
The integration aspect.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Okay.
Do you know another thing in Scotland, right? The only place where you'll find this is probably Glasgow. But in England, you'll always get, Manchester, you've got your Pakistani area, you've got your African area, you've got your Eastern European area. I'd say Glasgow is an exception because Glasgow is like that. There's a lot of your ethnic minorities are sort of grouped together. However, see the rest of Scotland, like where I'm from, there's probably about 3,000 Muslims, but we're not all in one estate or one street or one area. We're spread out.
Do you all go to the same corner shop though? That's the question. And is it owned by your uncle?
Bruv, pretty much all the shops in Falkirk are owned by one family.
All four of them, yeah.
Oh, bro, there's like 50 of them, man. But do you know what it is? We're all spread out, and when you're spread out amongst a community, it's a lot easier for the local communities to accept you, if that makes sense. So when you're spread out, you're speaking to a lot of different people. So it's just like the R rate of coronavirus, if you want. If you're out speaking to 30, if you're out about, you interact with 30 people, they're going to remember that 30 and they're going to speak to their families and things like that. So the people you've affected are more than just a handful of people that sort of by accident walk into, Moss Side in Manchester, for example, or South Hall in London. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe I was in there. You see what those brown people are doing. But it's not like that here. It's more in terms of I can walk out in the street, I'll speak to my neighbours, I'll speak to a good 30 or 40 people throughout the area when I'm doing my 1 hour sanctioned walk by the government, and they'll remember that. They remember that more because I've got my beard, my wife's wearing a hijab, my son's out, and they'll remember that more than them walking into an Asian dominated area or a black dominated area or a Chinese dominated area where they're just going in for a specific reason and they've got no reason to talk to anybody. They'll remember that. So that's part of when you say you need to fight Islamophobia in Scotland, there's not much to fight. There's not much to fight because there's not that much Islamophobia. Don't get me wrong. There's obviously going to be a small percentage that is going to be like that, but majority of the people, to be honest with you, bro, in Scotland, they don't really mind. Do you know what I mean? If that makes sense.
See, you don't really mind, but if you think about it, everybody in this country is a foreigner. I mean, if we look at the Anglo-Saxon history of the actual UK itself, you just think to yourself, well, in that case, the Queen, who is the head of state, she's also a foreigner, and we need to understand what is. And I remember,
religion is foreign as well. The state religion is an adopted religion, a foreign adopted religion of Christianity.
Well, it's a Aramaic religion, isn't it? So it didn't invent in England or Scotland or Ireland or Wales. But if you look at Scotland's history, the Celtics, and like the people here are you probably want to say the Scottish people are the least of the foreigners, if you want. Like the families,
I'd agree with that, actually.
The families that come from here, they've got their lineage go all the way back. You can trace there's towns that are named after the people that stayed in that town. Like from back in the day, Campbellstown, the family of Campbell stayed there, things along those lines. And it's quite interesting when you look at Scotland compared to when they say go back home. They've probably got more of a right to tell everybody else to go back home because they got invaded by the Vikings, they got invaded by the English, and then now the Pakistanis.
To keep the Scots out, didn't they?
Yeah,
couldn't handle the Scots.
Well, the Romans couldn't get up past Scotland, could they?
They couldn't.
Yeah. They couldn't, and one of the walls that the Romans built where I stay actually runs up to here. So like they couldn't get past a certain point in Scotland, and even the Game of Thrones is sort of is based on something. There's that program. But if you don't know what it is, but you're that 1% that didn't watch it. But like even if you look at it, it's sort of based on the Scottish being the being the sort of the White Walkers from that program, and they couldn't get past the wall sort of thing. And it's quite interesting that the Scottish people have always had a resilience to oppression from day dot. They've been oppressed. They've had the Romans, they've had the English, they've had a lot of people try to take over them, but they've always had that stance, that they've always felt that thing against oppression. And they still to this day. I mean, we were talking if we ever get onto it, but like Celtic and Rangers. But if you look at the Celtic contingency of Scotland, they're heavily in favour of Palestine.
That's right.
They're heavily in favour.
Why explain that? Because Celtic and Rangers, for those who don't know, that's the big derby there, right? That's the big rivalry of football clubs. Now you've got Celtic, which is all Catholic. From what I remember, all the Pakistanis support Celtic,
pretty much,
In Rangers, it's not, Now you've got on one side, you literally see in the football stands, Celtic fans holding up Palestinian flags, right? And then you got Rangers holding up the Israeli flags. Explain that to me, man. How does that work?
The only reason Rangers fans will throw up the Israeli flag is because Celtic hold up the Palestinian flag. So it's not politically motivated.
Why do the Celtic fans hold up Palestinian flags? Explain it, because if you look at it from the outside, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. However, there's a lot of oppression that's went on both sides, like to the Protestants and to the Catholics and whatnot. And you've got to remember that Catholics stem from sort of Ireland. And if I try and put logic to it, it's sort of like, when Ireland was going through its famine, the Khalifa at the time sent so many thousands of so many thousands of whatever it was in the monetary value at the time, and food and things along those lines. To the Irish, and the Queen actually stopped it from going to Ireland, saying that no, it's not going to go through our channels. However, they came to a negotiation and said, okay, X amount can get through, and the Irish always remember stuff like that. It's a big thing that the Ottomans sent a massive when they were going through the famine. The famine was a direct result of the oppression that the English were putting on the Irish. And the Muslims were like, you know what, basically allow that. We're gonna look after these people because they're in need. And that shows you the concern the Muslims had way back then. And it shows you that the English were like, no, we don't want it. It's not going to them. And then the Muslims were like, well, we're not going to have that. So let's have a negotiation, and they sent X amount across, and things like that. And even to this day, I can't. That's the only thing I can put it down to, in the fact that the people that are part of the Celtic support at that time, they're more aware of what's going on in Palestine, and like it says, they don't stand for oppression. You've got to look at Rangers Celtic as more than just a football team for these guys. These guys live and die for this club, literally. Back in the day when I was growing up, it was, if you were in a Rangers area, you had to be a Rangers supporter. If you were in a Celtic area, you had to be a Celtic. There was no choice in the matter. There was no choice in the matter. And some areas are still like that. Where even one town in Glasgow, where Asda have got traditionally a green sign of Asda, they had to change it to blue because they kept taking it down. Yeah, it's quite severe.
Way.
Yeah, and you've got to remember, a lot of people have died over this. However, the Rangers fans, I grew up in a Rangers area. My dad, when I was a kid, he put a Celtic top on me, and I got battered. I remember wearing a full Celtic top in a Rangers dominated area. I went to primary 1, bro. I got beat up from primary 1s to well, when I say primary 1, 2, and 3, I mean like 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds. They all had their turn on beating me up. So I had no choice but to be a Rangers fan from like a little kid. But when I grew older and I started going to the football games, I seen the racism that was flying about. And it's from both sides, by the way. The Celtic fans and the Rangers fans, they're equally as bad as each other. And it's not Power Rangers, as Issa Khan was with that he would put. And you've got to remember, it's quite a deadly situation. So the Palestinian thing is that the Catholics are more aware to oppression as that I did mention that story. However, the Rangers holding up the Israeli flags, it's nothing. If it is political, it's a very, very small amount of people that would know about it or choose to do it. But that's just a response to the Palestinian flag.
Okay, alhamdulillah. There's a question here by Muslim BB as well. Is there still dawah happening in Scottish cities now? Since you stopped doing it, is any dawah going on?
There is. To be honest, everybody's doing their own little things, and they're trying to do it without much success because it's all about a little fundraiser here or a Scottish Open Day here. It's Open Day in the mosques used to be a big thing. Not as much. I'm not going to lie. When I was doing it, it was I used to be the coordinator. I used to make sure that it was happening and stay in touch. I mean, I used to put in a lot of miles driving down to London, back up again, then up to Aberdeen, and it's a lot of miles that I put on the car at the time, and I didn't have anything to my name. The brothers that knew me, but at the moment, there's nothing really happening that I would say that this is absolutely amazing what's happening over there, if that makes sense. But I can see it, inshallah, in the next couple of years, the youth they're getting more geared towards Islam, as from what I can see, as much as they are turning away from the religion. But yeah, I kind of feel guilty about that because I know I've got the means and I've got the ability to go and do it, but I became so disillusioned at the time, and people might be like, "Oh, how could your iman get so low?" and yada yada. But when what Shaitan tries to do is he tries to the current word of the day is isolates you as one person. He makes you feel alone. This is what Boris Johnson should be actually doing. But however, this is what he makes you feel like, and when you're feeling like that, and it's causing arguments in the house because, or you're the one that's going out and you're the one that's doing this and you're the one doing that, it just and then when my son came along, it just felt like, this is not a good time for me. But yeah,
inshallah, I think you can still do something now. It's never too late. We can always support you and help you and get things set up, even if you want to use the IDP model and stuff like that. We can always do something, inshallah. But we've got Issa Khan in the house. Assalamu alaikum, Issa.
How's it going?
You want to be paid in Iron Brew, yeah? Issa wants to be paid in Iron Brew, bro. Umar, you gotta get this guy a case of Iron Brew.
Bro, I'm upset with Iron Brew to the next level.
Everyone
They changed the recipe.
Man.
Oh no!
Sugar tax, innit?
Sugar tax.
Bro.
What they did was they took out what do you call it? They took out the sugar, and they replaced it with aspartame.
Sweeteners.
Yes, sweeteners. And bro, wallahi, bro, my wife's had 2 strokes, and we used to drink Iron Brew all the time. And when they changed the recipe, within a week of us drinking it, my wife developed these severe migraines. And we had, Yeah, we had to stop drinking it, and
Wow.
they brought out it's the 1901 recipe, because that's when Iron Brew was first originally made in Falkirk. This is where I stay. This is where the original factory was. The original recipe was made.
So the girders are actually in Falkirk, yeah?
Yeah, so the original Iron Brew
It's in
factory.
Glasgow now, though, isn't it?
Yeah?
Byron,
Oh, it's gone
it's
now.
in Glasgow, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in just outside Glasgow now. Yeah, just outside
Yeah.
Glasgow. They moved it, but yeah, they changed it, and bro, it had a lot of impact on my wife, and a lot of they brought the recipe back out because they were losing. From my understanding, they were losing a lot of sales because a lot of people just stopped drinking. It tasted off. It didn't taste right. But subhanallah, man, Iron Brew. Bro, back in the days, I used to just drink that like water.
Do you know what? I have to say that they were a bit crazy not to do what Coca-Cola didn't do. And that is the only place, I think there's 2 places in the world, if I remember correctly, that Coca-Cola hasn't taken precedence. And Scotland is one of them. So what Iron Brew should have done, if you're out there, Barra, and you're listening to this, then learn from this. Change your recipe back and do what Coca-Cola done. Do the non-tax version, do the tax version as well. And I guarantee you, even that tax version, people will buy it.
Yeah, they've started to do that now. They've got the glass bottles. They brought the glass bottles back out and the original recipe.
Have they put the sugar back in it, though?
Yeah, they put the sugar back in. It's like 40% or something.
Oh, wow.
All right, Mahmoud Hussein's got some comments here. He's hello, Omar, speak English. Putter.
Who?
Mahmoud, yeah. He doesn't understand, bro. He doesn't understand anything you're saying, yeah.
These guys from York, man. It's like
the guys from York. He's pretend Scottish.
York, yeah, exactly. How can he say anything?
the most integrated.
He's not even Scottish, nor is he English.
Bro, he's the most integrated guy that I've ever met in my life. MashaAllah. You want to talk about integration?
All right, what else have we got? I think, yeah, that's it, man. I've heard Scott's put Iron Brew in their cereal. Is that true? Omar, is that true?
I'm not going to lie, bro. I have done this before.
Nah.
In what cereal? In what cereal?
Rice Krispies, bro.
And what did it taste like?
Bro, it was the worst thing I've ever tasted in my life.
Actually, I have to say, when I came up to Scotland, I tried that deep fry business. So I tried a deep fry Mars bar. Don't even go there. It actually feels like it's melting inside. No, astaghfirullah, man. And a deep fried pizza.
Yes, a piece of crunch, bro.
Yo, astaghfirullah, man. That stuff is just, oh, man.
Bro, we had, my dad used to have a chip shop. And that was, bro, deep fried pizza is called a pizza crunch. And you had a deep fried Mars bar. Bro, both of those things were used to sell all the time. All the time.
Wow. SubhanAllah.
Yeah. Isa, would you have a deep fried pizza, bro?
Bro, I'd probably have it if I was influenced by these guys. If they were around me, I'd probably just give in and have it. But it's not my it's not one of the. It's not my final meals. If I was going for my last meal, it definitely wouldn't be on my last meal.
Alhamdulillah.
I've actually never been to Scotland, but I don't know.
Man, you don't know where you're missing out, man. It's an absolute dump.
Is it nice? Yeah.
Sorry, no, let me say that back. Yeah, Glasgow is an absolute dump, but Scotland is really, really beautiful. I have to say.
Yes. Glasgow's like a bad borough in London. Like you drive from. Yeah. You drive through somewhere and you're like, I don't want to be here. That's what Glasgow's like.
Basically, it's Gotham City.
One thing I have to recommend, everybody has to do this, yeah? Especially if you're a southerner, yeah? Because you guys haven't got a clue about what natural beauty is. You have to come to Newcastle. You have to drive up to Newcastle and make that drive from Newcastle to Edinburgh.
Yeah.
It's the most beautiful drive.
Yeah.
That's quite nice.
Because you're literally on the coast, right? So you've got the sea on one side and you've got like this beautiful scenery on the other side. Omar knows what I'm talking about, yeah?
Yeah.
That drive from Newcastle to Edinburgh is the one to do.
Bro, do you know when you hit Berwick? When you hit Berwick, Jedburgh, do you know when you hit Berwick and you can and just depends on which way you're going, but if you're going down to Newcastle and it's on your left-hand side, the water is actually blue. You can see to the bottom. It's so clear, subhanAllah, man. It really is. It's natural beauty. People pay money to go abroad. Bro, like we got it on our doorsteps. It's like literally right there.
Yeah, man.
The only difference being is 40 degrees colder than anywhere else that you think about going.
we got real men up here, Jamil. Yeah, so doesn't matter about
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. That's why we're wearing t-shirts down here. And you guys, oh well, actually, Omar's got a what do you call it? He's wearing a t-shirt.
Bro, it's like 6 degrees up here. This is us. This is our summertime.
And, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So it's yeah, you got to do that drive. I have to say, Edinburgh is a beautiful city as well. I have to say that.
Edinburgh's
Do you know,
nice.
that was one thing I was going to say. Do you know Edinburgh is very cultural? You get a lot of Spanish people, Chinese people, a lot of people from all over. That's one thing when I set up the Dawah stall there, I was shocked. American, everybody was there.
There's a lot of tourists there.
There's a lot of tourists, and because I'm obviously not from Edinburgh. However, the first Dawah stall I set up was Edinburgh, and mashallah tabarakallah, we had a massive success there. We started. I mean, the group that we started, like I said, it was called Vision Islam, and we started new Muslim programs. We tried to replicate it, but it fell apart again when I left to join AIRA. It sort of fell apart because I wasn't the driving force behind it. So what I found was I don't know if that's questioning my sincerity or whatever, but it was wherever I went, if I wasn't the driving force in Scotland sort of area, then eventually it would fall apart. Which is a kind of shame, but Dawah shouldn't rely on one person. Do you know if IDC, Abu Tayeb, if you left or whatever, something happened to you, you passed away or whatever, it shouldn't stop because you're not there. It shouldn't stop because Hale's not there. It shouldn't stop because... I
mean, it's one of the things that, I was very conscious about for the last sort of 2008, I think it was, we changed our tactic a little bit and we moved away from the whole celebrity Dawah type of situation. What we did was we invested in the local talent, if you like, yeah? And we moved away from the whole celebrity thing and we said, you know what, we've got to make homegrown du'at. So we invested in individuals who would then be able to, and not just one or two, a number of individuals would then be able to carry on the dawah, even if IDC didn't exist, right? There would still be people who could do the dawah, who could still be able to make the call effectively and successfully, right? So this was the idea that we changed our tactic a little bit because I'll be honest, I was so sick of this whole idea that you have to rely on somebody else from outside of your city to come up and give dawah, and if they couldn't make it, then the dawah wouldn't happen, right? Or if and they wouldn't understand the culture, the context, and sometimes what would end up happening is you'd bring someone from outside, and they'd actually make a mess when they came and leave, and you'd have to pick up the mess basically, yeah, because they don't know what the circumstances are there. I mean, there's nothing wrong with bringing external speakers now and then. It's good. It switches it up a little bit. But what we said was, let's invest in some local talent and develop them so then they become the local du'at rather than relying on people from outside, because they understand the context, they understand the people that they're dealing with, you know. Like when the Londoners came up to Newcastle to help at the dawah stall and stuff, they were really shocked that the dawah stall our dawah stall's not, it doesn't have to be missionary style. Why? We're there every week consistently, and people know that we're there, and they come to us. We're not chasing people. They come to us. They ask questions. They have a discussion, and it's very, very laid back. Basically, yeah, it's a lot chilled out because the people are different. Whereas down south, you have to chase people and you have to run after them, and you have to try and literally grab them and have a conversation with them. Whereas over here, it was like it's not like that. People are happy to just come and have a conversation with you about something. So
that's
the local is important.
Yeah, no, but I definitely agree with this. And another thing, I mean, specifically towards London, and this is something that we've seen a change of, and I'm sure Isa would agree with me on this, is that since the lockdown, people have had more time to realize about themselves. And this is an opportunity for the da'wah as well, because in the society that we live in, we were working and then we were sleeping, and then came work and then came sleep. After work, there was sleep, and then after sleep came work. So this is literally the cycle that people went through. Now people have actually started to realize, well, actually, hold on a second, there's actually more to life than just work and sleep. And I think after this, we're going to we're in for a little treat.
Do you know, just off the back of that, Jamil, subhanAllah, I just had a conversation with somebody in my work, and I was just checking up on them to see if they were okay, and the person said no. I was like, okay, what's going on? You're working from home, it's very difficult, working customer service, you're like all the natural conversations that flow. And I was like, how's your work life out? How's your life outside of work? And the person was like, I don't know. I was like, what do you mean you don't know? And they're like, I'm having to think. I'm with myself. I'm having to think about what is life. You know, just like, it's powerful. You know, they've come to that self-realization, and it's amazing. And the da'i in me wanted to be like, oh, do you know about Islam? But I couldn't because the work's setting, and I don't want to get fired. I was like, yeah, it's interesting. It is interesting, that, isn't it? It makes you think that there's more to life than just shopping and buying, and you know, what is the purpose of life? You know, and I'm like, the purpose of life is to worship Allah in the back of my head. But you know, it's quite interesting. That's just one person. How many other hundreds of thousands of people feel like this? And you know, because they feel like this, this is quite. There's either one or two ways it's going to go. It's either going to go into deep depression, you know, when they start, or the other is they start going out and trying to find the meaning of life and things like that.
And I think we're in at a time which is actually quite nice, because people have started realizing this now. But when they go back to work, they're going to get into their routine, inshallah. And in a few months or a few weeks' time, they're actually going to look at it and go, hold on a second, how have I suddenly become this robot again? What happened to me when I was in lockdown? So inshallah, maybe that will make them think as well. But Allahu A'lam, and I think we're in for a very big change. They keep using this term of the new normal, don't they?
Yeah,
and I think this is...
Yeah, my company's adopted that term as well. So I think, the new normal, whatever that is what's followed.
Whatever that is,
whatever that is. But go back to your point, I would say, what happened when you're talking about people coming externally from up? They come up with their own, like, they don't understand so it might be the conversation that they train out as a logical conversation, whereas in Scotland they don't want to have a logical conversation. You know, like step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leads to step 6. How can you not agree with step 6? Oh, now you're a Muslim, you have to say your shahada. You know, that's what was back in, like, you know, 5 or 6 years ago. But Scottish people, they know what you're playing at when you do that. Oh, I know what you're trying to do is just turn me into a Muslim. You know, like they call it to your face, and you're like, and because but the thing is, because we've trained people to speak like that, they don't know what to say. They don't know how to have a normal conversation. But the natural way of the Scottish people is to speak a lot. I speak a lot. You know, I thought JC was Scottish when I first met him. Then I heard the accent. But then what happens is it's just a natural conversation. So what we need to do is equip ourselves with the basics of da'wah and the basic aqidah, and then just go out and start speaking. Obviously, like you said earlier on, direct da'wah, we need to do it. It needs to be done. However, we forget about communal da'wah. We forget about just being a good person. That has a massive impact on a lot of people. And then it's usually followed up with what I started doing, or recently it sort of fell off, was just sort of like when I'd done something good, I went to my neighbours, they'd be like, oh, why are you doing this? I was like, my religion commands me to do this. I have to be a good person. And this part of this being a good person is commanded from our religion. They're like, oh, where is this? What, you know, like there's your natural conversation right from there then. But we need to get over that barrier of the shamefulness of being a Muslim. And I've said this from day one, is that we're ashamed to be a Muslim, in terms of that we don't, obviously we carry a beard, but to proclaim it, you know, like, I'm a Muslim and this is what I believe in. People are actually ashamed to say that. You know, like, I believe in one creator. I believe in I believe in the last prophet. I believe that I have to pray 5 times a day. You know, when we talk about integration and the opposite side of that, or the positive side, if you look at the cons of when you integrate too much, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. However, your salam might take a hit. You know, like, oh, I'm out. It's Asr time. I'm not going to pray in front of these people because they might not accept me. You know, that's the opposite of what happens, and it does happen. It has happened. I witnessed it, and it is. It's quite a. You need to be balanced as well, and that's one thing that I always wanted to speak to people, is that when you're getting involved in da'wah, you need to be firm in your aqidah. You have to 100%. You need to learn about the different groups. You need to learn about the arguments that people might come out with, and you know, the Mu'tazila, the Khawarij, everything. You need to know about this, because you're going to meet those people out in the streets if that's the way that you want to go down. And if you don't do that, and I've seen people that I've given dawah training to, or whatever, I've told them what to do, and at the end of the questioning, they're questioning themselves, because you've introduced a philosophical argument that they would never thought of before, and then you've tried to explain to them who created Allah and the regress theory and yada 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 and blah blah blah. And then they're just like, oh, wait a minute, that question won't move from their head. The next thing you know, shaitan's in their head, and you're the one that put it there in the first place, and you didn't need to do that. And that's one of the other reasons that what I felt uncomfortable about as well. And I changed it up a little bit in terms of, you know, we don't need to be. Islam's spiritual. It's a spiritual religion as well, and we sometimes forget that, and we need to implement that as well when we're giving our da'wah.
There's a question. There's a comment. Come on there. I've always wanted to visit Scotland after being told by a Scottish man that their national animal is the unicorn. What's all that about, bro?
Our national animal is the haggis, bro. It's got 3 legs. 2 legs are longer than the third one, because when it's going around a hill, it needs to balance itself out. And it only comes out between winter and springtime on the morning dew of a sunrise in mid-April. If you don't catch it, then we're going to go hungry for the next year, bro. That's yeah, but yeah. Then interestingly enough, after I told that fake story, I realised that our national animal is a unicorn. I don't know why it is, but they never tell you why. But yeah,
it's because you're a bunch of fairies. Oh no, sorry. What else?
No, subhanallah. It's our other national animal is the Loch Ness monster.
Oh yes.
Yeah, that is our national animal, and I don't care what anybody says. It's real.
Is any evidence for that, brother?
Hmm?
Is any evidence for that?
We don't need evidence, brother. We just we believe, isn't it?
We believe.
Is that what you say in the dance hall, yeah?
Yeah, that's what we do, bro. We just believe. Bro, we believe in the Loch Ness monster. Of course, we're going to believe in Allah.
Alhamdulillah. Well, that's that, guys. It's the end of the show. Alhamdulillah, it was a good show. Jazakallah khair for coming on, Omar.
Barakallah feek.
It was good having you on. Jamil, you too, bro. Good. Isa, any final words, bro?
Yeah. When's the Dawah starting again in Falkirk?
When's the Dawah starting again in Falkirk? Brother, when are you coming to Falkirk to help start the Dawah?
There you go.
There you go. We're coming, bro. We're coming.
Isa, you got to do that drive, man, from Newcastle to Edinburgh to Glasgow, and then Glasgow to Falkirk. Yeah, you will see. You know, as soon as you come to Edinburgh, you'll be amazed about Scotland. Then you go to Glasgow and you say, "I want to get back to London." Yeah. and then you go to Falkirk and you'll say, "Yeah, nice brother, but you know."
It's just full of
yeah, that's
pretty much.
That's too funny.
All right, Jimmy, any last words, bro?
Hey?
Any last words?
Yeah, the best thing about Scotland, isn't it? We know what it is.
What's that?
It's the M6 out of there. Anyway.
Yeah, that's me.
Now, we love you Scottish people, man. We love you Scottish people. You're fine, mashallah. What was Jesus going to say?
How long does it take you to drive down to London?
I live in London. I don't need to drive down. It's quite local for me. Speaking of which, I'll tell you something about driving, actually. Hold on, sorry, Omar, just to cut you short there. London has actually been like the London motorways. I use them because I'm a key worker, or what they call us. The motorways in I was going to say the UK, in London have actually been like the Scottish motorways. I have to say that they've been absolutely quiet, but the road surfaces are, it's been brilliant.
You know the stupid thing about London? Let me tell you something so stupid about London, yeah? I'll tell you.
Go on.
If you want to drive from one end of London to the next, yeah, and I did this. I remember one day I was driving from Leicester to London. It took me 1 hour 45. Check this out, yeah? From Leicester to London, 1 hour 45. But then I had to go to South London. It took me longer to go from North London to South London than it did from Leicester to London. It did not make sense.
Do you know why?
Because it's stupid. London is stupid.
No, it's because London is a country of its own kind, bruv. If you want to go anywhere in the world, you can do it within the M25. Yeah, baby.
It's stupid, bro. It's stupid.
Guy does around the M25 in London.
That's it.
Amar, any final words before we wrap this show up, inshallah?
Keep me in your du'as, keep the ummah in your du'as, and basically make dua that I wake up for suhoor, because if I fall asleep now, bruv, I'm not waking up from the end of Fajr time.
Alhamdulillah. All right, on that note, inshallah, we're going to wrap it up there. Jazakumullah khair, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow. Who have I got tomorrow, by the way? Who's on tomorrow? Let me check. Hold on.
So he'll wake up.
Who is on tomorrow?
Wait, manager, wake up.
We've got a good guest tomorrow, from what I remember.
Oh, wonderful. We're not good guests, guys. Congratulations. We've all been downgraded.
Oh, yeah. You know who I've got tomorrow? I've got a brother from Canada called Robert Dufour, and he's going to talk about Islam for Europeans. So that's going to be an interesting conversation.
MashaAllah.
He runs an organization, Islam for Europeans. So that's going to be an interesting conversation, inshallah, tomorrow. All right, so make sure everyone tunes in for that. Midnight tomorrow, we'll be back, inshallah. In the meantime, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Salam.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.